All right, this week we learned about division and multiplication rules. And when it comes to what the answer is going to end up being, whether or not it's positive or negative, those rules are going to be the same for division and multiplication. And not only are they going to be the same for that, but they're also going to be the same for fractions, for decimals, for percentages, and for regular integers, for regular whole numbers. So it doesn't matter. Don't let the fractions or the decimals confuse you. Anytime you're dealing with multiplication or division of two numbers, the answers will always be the same according to these rules. And you guys have all heard the song before, but I'll sing it now. If you want to be cool and stay in school, learn your division and multiplication rule. Same sign, answer is positive. Different sign, answer is negative. Now listen, if that helps you, that's fine. It's also important to remember that when you're multiplying or dividing two numbers, so for example, 2 times 3, you will always have, when you're done, between the actual original problems and the answer, you will always end up with either 0 or 2 negatives. 0 or 2. There will never be 1 and there will never be 3. And of course, because you're only dealing with two numbers, there will never be 4. So for example, if I have 2 times a negative 3, I have 1 negative right here. That means I only have room for 1 more, because I can either have 0 or 2, and I can't take that one away. So therefore, my answer is 2 times 3 is 6. Well, is it positive or negative? Well, we've already got 1 negative here, and we know we either have to have 0 or 2, so the answer is automatically going to be negative. If we have 2 times 2, well, we can either have 0 or 2. We don't have any here, so we can't add 1. We don't have room for 1 more. The answer is going to be a positive 4. Same thing goes for negative 2 times 2, or negative 2 times a negative 2. We've got 1, 2 negative signs. We don't have room for any more. Therefore, the answer will be a positive 4. Now, again, let's take a look at some fractions. And again, the same rules apply when multiplying and dividing fractions. You need to go ahead and get your answer, and then after that, you can look at the original problem and decide, well, is it positive or is it negative? To multiply, simply multiply across a fraction like below, and I'll show you that in just a second. You must simplify and reduce, though. Remember, if you do not simplify and reduce a fraction when you're multiplying or dividing, it is dead wrong. You are also not allowed to have any improper fractions. An improper fraction is something like this, where you have a 9 over 4. You must reduce that. Okay, and we'll show you more of those in just a second. But let's go back to a regular multiplication of fractions. Okay, and let's just do something simple. 1 over 4 times a negative 2 over 3. Well, all we do is simply multiply straight across, like so. Multiplying fractions is actually very easy. You just have to remember, well, will the answer be positive or will it be negative? Well, we apply the same rule we did up here earlier. We have 1 negative sign here, and we can either have 0 or 2. Well, we can't go back to 0 because we already have 1, so we know that the answer is going to be negative, because a negative times a positive is always a negative. So you can either remember the rule or you can sing the song. Same signs, answer is positive. Different signs, answer is negative. Like so. Well, again, we multiply straight across. 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 3 is 12. Well, we're not done because we have to reduce this. So the answer is going to be, and this reduces to 1 over 6, and that's a negative, because we find a common number that goes into both 2 and 12, and it's 2. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 12 6 times. Your answer is negative 1 over 6. We can also do this with mixed numbers. So for example, if we have 2 and 1 over 2 times 1 over 4, We can't do that in its current form. We have to change this to an improper fraction, multiply it out, and then change it back to either a mixed number or just a regular fraction. In order to do that, we have to take this 2 and multiply it by that 2, which is 4, and then add this 1, which is 5. And therefore, that becomes an improper fraction of 5 over 2 times 1 over 4. Well, again, we multiply straight across like we did before. 5 times 1 is 5. 2 times 4 is 8. This will not reduce anymore. Therefore, the answer is 5 over 8. Now, if we had had a negative 2.5 times 1 over 4, the answer would then have been negative because we have one negative here, positive here. We have to have at least one more negative because we must have either 2 or 0. Okay. Now, if this had been an improper fraction like 9 over 4, we would need to change that back into a mixed number. We'll probably do one of those here in a little bit. Now it says to divide, multiply by the reciprocal. This means flip the second fraction and multiply. So you can remember either one of two things. You can remember that you need to flip the second fraction and then multiply, because we can't divide fractions. We have to flip and then multiply. Or you can use something called keep, change, and flip. Okay, so for example, if I have 1 over 2 divided by 1 over 5, well, I can't do that. So what I have to do is I have to multiply by the reciprocal. And what that means is the second fraction. Now remember, it has to be the second one, not the front one. But the second one I need to flip over. And this will then become 1 over 2 times 5 over 1. And then we would just solve. That would be 5 over 2. Now we're not done. Now this doesn't reduce anymore, but we have to change this back into what's called a mixed number. And we call it a mixed number because we have a combination of whole numbers and a fraction. This is not the correct answer. I will mark this wrong every time. What you have to do is divide the top number by the bottom number, find out your remainder, and get the mixed number. So the 5 will go in the house. Top dog goes in the house. 2 goes in the outside. How many times will 2 go into 5 without going over? It'll go in twice. 2 times 2 is 4. And we have a remainder of 1. And we put that 1 over a 2 in a fraction. Excuse me, over this 2 in a fraction. That 2 right there. The answer is 2 1/2. Now keep in mind, if we had started out with a negative and a positive, or a negative and a negative, our number might have been a little bit different. Remember, to apply your rule, you're either going to have 0 or 2 negatives. 0 or 2 negatives. So, what is the value of this expression? Well, all we do is simply multiply it out, and then we can apply our rule. We have a negative here and a negative here. Therefore, the answer is going to be positive. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. We only have room for 2 minus signs, and we've already used those up. Therefore, all we have to do is multiply 16 times 13, like so. 3 times 6 is 18. Carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. Bring your 0 down. This is 16 here, because 1 times 16 is 16. 8, 0, 1, 2. The answer is a positive 208. Remember, it's positive because we had 2 negatives, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Going back to our rule, same signs, answer is positive. All right, just remember the song. What is the value of this expression? We're taking 100 and we're dividing it by a negative 4. Well, we know that the answer, regardless, is going to be negative because we have one negative sign here, and we can't just have one. We have to either have 0 or 2. Therefore, the answer is going to be negative. Now all we do is just divide it out. 100 divided by 4. The answer is negative 25. More to come.